Hello everyone, and you're welcome to another episode of Relationships with Adenyke. On today's show, we're going to be talking to couples who've been married for less than 5 years in the series that we're doing on love, relationships, family. And I'm excited to have these lovely couples with me today. First is Femi and Kemi. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And I also have with me Tosin and Ayo.
Hey, thank you.
It's good to have you guys on the show.
Thank you.
So, I'm quite excited because, whenever we're talking about relationships or we're talking about marriage, I always enjoy listening to different couples, learning about their journey. There's always something new that I learned personally, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers today would be interested in just knowing what some of the things that you've gone through, some of the relationship hurdles you've had to cross. I believe that it's always quite important to just know where people have come from, because there's always something we can learn. So let's first of all start off. If I'm correct, Tosin and Ayo, you guys have been married for around about this year will be 5 years, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Exciting. Yes, there's always something about the first 5 years, so I know that you will have some things to share. And Kemi and Femi, you guys have been married for about 2 years now.
Yes. Two and some.
Two and some. Good, excellent. So halfway gone.
Yeah.
Let's see what So, making a decision to get married is a big one. Yeah. So let me first of all start off. Let me ask you, Ayo, when did you realize you were ready for marriage? Take us back to maybe your relationship, how long you guys have been in courtship.
Tosin and I had been dating for like about 2 years, and before I proposed, I had to kind of take account of where I was in my life, and when I dated her, even starting, I knew that this is someone that had wife potential, so that was one of the criteria to even get into the relationship. And when I felt that I was getting to that point where I'm ready to propose and look at the future, I just had to see, was I able to support a marriage? Was I able to support a household? And there were certain things that I needed to get in order before I could propose, because I wanted to be that man that is able to provide when I'm in the relationship. So once I felt that I had those things in place, then I was confident to propose to her.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I always say that I'm old school. I've said that before in previous episodes. So I make that assumption that the guy proposes to the woman, not the woman proposes to the man. Yeah. So that's why I asked Femi, how did you not only propose, but when did you decide that Kemi was the right one? And what was your journey, even in your relationship, before you got married?
So for us, I knew right from the time. I saw the potential in her. Even though
whenever people say, so this is the second time I'm hearing a man say, I saw the potential.
Yes, initially she gave me a little bit of hard time.
Okay, all right.
And I think it's something that I expected, but it was a decision that I knew ahead of time, that okay, this is someone I can talk to and has that potential for marriage. And we dated for a year. Then I popped the question. I said, hey, would you like to marry me? And I guess by the time I popped the question, she already had an inclination that the question is coming soon. And by the time I asked her and she said yes, then my mind started to think about, okay, the money for the wedding and the whole thing. And all those things start to come to mind, and it's like, it's reality right now.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that has been our journey. And then we were in courtship for a year and a half before we married.
How important was that period for you? Looking back now, you've been married for a few years. I know everybody talks about laying the right foundation, but do you feel, and feel free to be very honest, do you feel that, your experiences then has really gone a long way? Do you feel you waited enough time? Do you think you gave it a bit more time, or there were things that was after you got married you were able to actually deal with? And let me ask Tosin.
Well, I definitely feel like the different experiences that we went through while we're in courtship, it definitely helped us with marriage. Like as far as like we're both like in school together at one time, so we helped each other for that. Financial management, my husband is really good with that, so he helped me like with finances. I was okay at it, but he was more of an expert, so he helped me with that. Also just working together just to build, stuff for the future, like our goals, because at that time we're both in school, both hustling, but I feel like and then also communication, because there was a lot of things that like a lot of habits that we noticed about each other, but it wasn't, I guess, until we got married that we realized there's more that we need to discover. But I definitely feel like the time of courtship was like the interview process, and when you go for a job interview, and then the people see like, okay, is this the person? So I think it was interview process for him as well as me. So.
Yeah.
Wow, I like that. And, if I should bring that to you, Kemi, what would you say are some of the things you feel was critical that you honed in on, and now you can look back and say, this was something that we addressed, in our while we're in courtship, and now being married, it's something that period enabled you to deal with it?
So I think for us, we did a couple of things that I feel like were just very helpful, even when I look back now. I think one of them was actually, we spent some time reading a couple of books together about marriage and relationships to just really help us frame our thinking. Of course, we had met each other, we courted for a very short time, I would say relative to some other people, but we just really were intentional about it. And then we actually did some intense planning. Okay. So I remember, what's the name of the book? One of Miles Monroe's book on
Monroe's book.
waiting, I think it was Waiting and Dating.
Waiting and Dating.
And basically, I remember taking that book, I took the different segments, articulated the different segments, and created questions based on that. And so we took them, and I gave him one copy. I took one copy, and we filled it out separately. This is about just almost anything, your goals. What church will you go to? How do you want to serve? How many children do you want to have? When do you want to, and where do we want to live? Just those things that he said were key, because we knew we were going into something that going down a path that we hadn't been before. And so we filled it out separately, and then we came together and just went through it. It took a couple of, hangout times, so to say, or periods, and we just went through it. Okay, what was your response? What was my response? And that's laid the foundation for our goals today. So when we even we got clarity around what are the things that are important to us. So because we didn't go to school together, we probably even lived in somewhat different worlds before we met each other. And so that really helped us shape our thinking and really understand and address some differences.
Wow.
Number of kids. He wanted 2, I wanted 3. I had to compromise eventually. At least
Rock, paper, scissors.
2.5, right?
We have a mistake one later, but this was like, Kevin, please. But the reality is, it really helps. Even now, when we think about our goals, some of the things that we're embarking on, dreaming about, praying about now, I believe the foundation started then, before we intentionally spent that time before, even outside of the wedding planning, because everything was happening together.
That's a very, very key point in terms that you guys have raised, that, there was a lot of intentional planning. And the last point you made, planning outside of the wedding, because like we all discover, once the wedding kicks in and all of that activity kicks in, everything else really just pauses. Even if you have a conflict, it's a wedding-related conflict, and that's all the energy. Let's fix this quickly and move on. But let me ask you, since we're on that topic, what was one of your most memorable? What's the one thing that was most memorable to you about your wedding? I'm curious. It's a lot of activity and preparation. So I'm going to ask every single person in 1 or 2 sentences. I want to see, I'm doing a little survey. So let me start with, thank you, Femi.
One of the memorable things about the wedding was the time during the reception.
Okay.
When she held up, we were asked to take a picture, and I held up Mr., she held up Mrs. So at that point in time, although it was dawning on me, it was like, yes, yes, you're in it. So I would say it was an additional light bulb moment for me. Like yes. The photographer is taking this picture, and it's like, so it was an additional light bulb moment. Although I know at that point she was tired, and it's like, oh, let's take the picture, let's take the but at that point in time, you're at the back of your mind, in the midst of the whole activity, you are also thinking that, yes, everyone is going to go home, and you are going to be with her, and it's like, okay, life starts from there.
Right.
So that was a memorable time when we took that picture. I held Mr. She held Mrs.
Interesting. What about you, Tosin?
My most memorable moment is when we danced in, because everyone knows me as the one that is the dancer, and Ayo was holding back the entire time. He outdanced me. So I was like, okay, so this guy is showing his full potential. So he was just showing me bits and pieces from dating as his girlfriend, then to his fiance, and now I'm his wife, so okay. So, so definitely when we danced, and I was like, okay, you know, I'm excited. This is the guy I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, and he's showing his full self, and he's very happy to be with me. So, yes.
So let me ask Kemi.
Wow. That was a tough one. Because really, I tell people that are engaged or trying to get married now to just say, make sure you enjoy your wedding and don't get caught up because everything went by so fast. But I think one of the very memorable moments was when I was saying my vows. And I did not expect to cry, but I was bawling throughout. And I joke now that, oh my God, I was like, who wrote these vows? I joke about it all the time, like, oh my God, why am I saying this? But it was powerful, it was emotional for me because I had read it, I'd gone through it. I'm one of those detailed people that would just read through everything. But at that moment when I was saying it, I was like, whoa, this is happening.
Wow, excellent. And let's get Ayos before we go on a break.
I mean, for me, there were definitely two key points. I mean, besides the fact that she said, yes, I do, you know, because that would just change the whole ceremony if I didn't get that. But it was when she was coming down the aisle and I met her halfway and I walked her the rest of the way because there were certain circumstances that were occurring at the time that certain people weren't present. So it was like almost like a symbolic thing for me to come and meet her halfway and bring her, you know, we walked together to start this union. So that was like a critical symbolic moment and just like symbolized, you know, a lot of what we had experienced and was coming to this moment. And then also at the reception, the night before, I had been working on a song that I was writing for her to sing at the reception. She didn't know, and you know, of course, all my fellas there, you know, they're all in the choir and everything. So we worked on the song and we sang it, and she was just crying and you know, just bawling and you know, just really touching. And you know, it's something that you know that I had a passion to do, and it's like, okay, this was a very you know deep expression of the love that I felt for her. You know, so I just put it in a song. So
That's beautiful. I love that. You guys have such, I think that's very poignant. Everything that you said, every one of you, beautiful. Thank you. We'll take a break and I'll be right back. Stay tuned. You're welcome back to today's episode of Relationships with Adenyke, and we've been having a very lovely time speaking to some of our couples with us today in the studio as we explore the first 5 years of marriage. We've called it This Thing Called Marriage. We know there's a lot of conversations that keep going on about it, but it's nice to hear from you all and your own experiences and your learnings, you know, even in marriage. So we've talked about your beginning, so let's just go back and I want you to cast your eye back at some of the very early days of marriage. You know, after the wedding, it's like, you know, you spent months planning, preparing. You've had this beautiful moment with friends and family. You've probably gone off on your honeymoon, and then you're back to your daily grind, daily living, you know. So I'm just curious, you know, a few weeks afterwards, you know, months afterwards, what are some of the things that started coming out? What are some of the, what I'll call tricky little things that you start noticing that, I think we need to have a meeting about this and discuss this now in this family. You know, what are some of the things that you remember that you needed to start getting on the same page with? And I'll let any one of you start off.
Well, I can think of two things.
Okay.
I think the first one was, hey, you just finished your wedding. You've spent a lot of money and maybe too much money. One of the things I realized was, we realized actually, was that we really needed to talk about money, and it was making us very nervous.
Finances, right?
Yes, finances. More from the standpoint, not that we hadn't talked about money in general, we were not on the same page, but we realized that it was something that we really needed to step back and really be intentional about where we were and what our plan was.
Can I ask you a question? Was this also because sometimes, and it might not be, but a wedding is a large expenditure, and it's, for a lot of couples, they just, let's just do it. And after a while, you start off, but even with your maybe savings and the rest of it, it's still at times surprising how much you've actually been set back. I mean, we hear stories of couples still having to pay months afterwards. So what you're saying is quite an interesting thing that people face. And I love the fact that, it's good to explore how you handled it, because people don't always handle that the best way.
I think, yeah, so you expressed it, beautifully, because being intentional about finances is something that we both believe in. We've taken the Dave Ramsey class, financial peace and everything. We've done all that. However, the just do it. We're going, and of course, I'm a victim, of course. I'm guilty rather of being, one of being in those kinds of situations. But what we realized very quickly was that both of us needed to talk about it, and we needed to be intentional about planning about it and praying about it, and understand what the real problem was, because we realized, I remember, I don't even know what the argument was about. By the time we really talked about it, it was that we were afraid of, this whole financial situation that we were in. So that was one. And so by the grace of God, through prayer, through planning, being intentional, and just making some key decisions, God really helped us. Another thing I noticed as a woman and as a wife was the need to respect my husband and be careful about my words and my choice of words. I just realized that the first couple of arguments that we got into had to do with my tone, my choice of words, and I was shocked at his reaction. And after we talked about it, I just realized, oh my God, the way I say things make a difference. And then the third thing I'll say, and I know I said two, the third thing I say is that I realized that my husband is human, and I needed to and he's an assignment that God has given to me. And my eyes opened. I mean, the way I will articulate it is, my eyes opened to my role as a woman to help my husband in the place of prayer, understanding that he is human and I need to help him. And so it just stirred that up in me to just say, anything, conflict could happen, anybody could, be in any kind of situation or could react in different ways. I needed to do my part, and I needed to make sure I covered him in prayer consistently.
Those are very important points that you raised, Kemi. There's just so many things that you've actually packed into some of that, especially, I hear this a lot, in the early days of marriages when couples start to relate with each other, the men would say, it's your tone. Women are like, what did I say? And I think that's quite interesting. I'm curious to know for you, Ayo, what are some of the things that, you feel you started to navigate, that were a bit from a male perspective?
I think with our relationship, it was, kind of like different dynamics because of where we were, being students, and I always joke that Tosin's like a professional student. It's like always in school working on a degree. So when we got married, she was still in school and everything. So it was balancing, the life of a student that's excelling, wants to get a 4.9 or, 10.0 if she can get it, and, just highly driven. So it's like balancing that time of, okay, you have to study, you have to stay up late, but hey, pay attention to me. Don't forget that I'm still here too. So it was, there were certain times like, hey, like this bed is, cold here, so, just, remind her once in a while, hey, you're still in school, but still make time and, give me, some attention. I'm here to support you. I don't want you to feel like, oh, I'm not supporting your dream, but also still, balance that time. She mentioned, finances and stuff like that. It wasn't really an issue for us as far as like discussing finances because, being in the relationship and at that point when there's so little finances to manage, it's very easy to be in agreement. So, but things progressed and got better. But other than that, I think most of the issues that probably would hit a lot of couples early on, I think that we kind of addressed them, in courtship. So maybe some of the big arguments that you would have had or things that would have been like, oh, I can't believe this. It's like, oh, I already knew this about you before, but, so it kind of helped in that way.
That's interesting that you'd say that, because I was actually, the first thing I was going to ask Tosin was, can you remember what your first big argument was as a married couple? Or conflict?
I would say it happened in courtship when he was helping me find furniture for my apartment, but it also happened in marriage because like both of us are very particular individuals. Okay, I'll give you an example. When I do laundry, I fold my socks and I tuck them in. And for him, he likes them rolled because he says they'll expand the socks.
The
way
elastic,
I fold my towels.
You can't just
So it was like the arguments we were having that were blowing up weren't like big issues, but they were big issues because there were like particular things like around the house, the type of couch, which couch looked better with which type of furniture. So I would say like the major thing was like trying to figure out, okay, how is this house our apartment at the time is gonna look like, and that we're both happy. And another thing is that I'm very independent. When I was in courtship, we're together in courtship, I never had to say, hey, I am going here, there. Like, it was just more of a get up and go. But now I have a husband that I'm under him because he's my covering, and I respect him as my husband, and after him is God. So I'm like, oh man, I actually have to ask someone before I do something. Like, I remember this one time we were having an all-nighter because I was still in school, professional student, when I married him, and it was like everyone was going to be studying 24 hours in the library, and everyone just stayed there. And I remember like, oh man, I have to ask him, what if he says no? What if he says come home? So that was like my biggest thing. I mean, even though he was like, he was like, okay, I understand, I support your vision, your dream, but at the same time, I know that was pretty hard for him. Like, my wife I didn't see her for 24 hours because she's in the library studying with these other, single students. So.
Single students. Interesting. Femi, what was your earliest, recollection of some of the kind of conflicts that you guys were having? I know you are the cool dude, but was there a time when you just blew up and you're like, ah?
I think I can recollect a couple. There was actually a time where I blew up at her, and it's like, and in regards to the tone, that she sometimes come up as someone that is like, did you actually hear what I said?
Right.
And sometimes her tone of reacting made me at that time blow up. And I also started studying myself,
Right.
as in how I react to her reaction.
Right.
Because it's in reacting that sort of everything blows up.
Right. Okay.
And
So at times, what you're saying is so critical that one of the first things you notice in the early years of marriage with conflict, at times it's not really the event that happened. It's the way the two people reacted to the event that
yes.
really causes a lot of the friction.
that if it is handled in a cool manner or in a calm manner with a calm mindset, I think the reaction is different.
Right.
I mean, they'll be able to resolve it, and the impact will be less.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that too, because definitely your reaction can diffuse or set a situation on fire.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's always like when you have that situation, you have to pause and think, this action or this thing that I could say, is it going to work towards resolution, or is it just going to work to satisfy me in this moment? Like, so when you're in that, you're constantly, in a battle of, your desire versus compromise versus the other person, and knowing that at the end of the day, you're not you're on the same team. So
Yes.
whatever it is you're
Yes.
fighting about,
Yes.
you should always come, meet in the middle and resolve it. So
I like that.
so-
Very good point. And I know there's some parts, because this is one of the key things that the first 5 years begin to reveal. And the way couples train themselves to respond to these things can impact the life of the marriage. A lot to still talk about, but we'll take a quick break. I'll be right back after this announcement. You're welcome back to today's episode of Relationships with Adenyke, where we are having an in-depth discussion on the early years of marriage and just couples' experiences and areas of, change and managing expectations. And our last point that we raised about just remembering some of the things that leads to conflict in the early days and how it's handled, and the tools, and because you need to be in tune with yourself also to really understand some of these dynamics. So we talked about different things, but I'm curious, the first 5 years of marriage, one of the things that really I think most couples deal with, like we said, are finances. What about family, in-laws, and the place of friends? I know that, these are the areas where most people, even career choices, there's so many areas that conflict comes along, So I'd like to just know, how did you navigate through some of these things? I know communication is key. What are your communication styles, and how were you able to come on the same page on these critical issues, dealing with each other's family, dealing with, situations as they occur? Anyone?
Ladies first.
So what was some of your initial, I know you've talked about different things, but learning, what would you say is your communication style?
For me, I like to be enthusiastic. When Ayo's talking, I like to show that I'm interested. I like to make eye contact. Like, everything will show from head to toe that I'm interested. But Ayo's communication style, you can't really tell if he's listening or not. Like, he's like, we're doing something totally different, but then at the end of the day, you realize that he did hear you. But for me, I like to repeat what the person said. Right. So if he tells me something, I'll be like, oh yeah, and then I'll talk back. But for him, he won't say anything. You're like, this guy's not listening to me. So we have different communication styles as far as that. And for me, if there's an issue that's bothering me, I don't like communicating about it right away, but Ayo's more of someone that wants to resolve the issue and find solutions.
Right.
So.
And how do you deal with that? When you're like, I'm absolutely not talking about this tonight. Ayo, what do you do then?
I think we should talk about it tonight. It's so funny because I don't know where I heard it, but it was basically, don't let, it's in the Bible, don't let the sun go down on your anger. So it's I just feel like any problem or argument or whatever that arises throughout that day, it would be unfortunate if it's at 9:59 and you're like, oh, I have to go to sleep and I have to resolve it now. But, you tend to want to resolve it, or at least have some kind of agreement before you go to sleep. Because when you sleep on that anger, it settles, becomes something else. The next day you're like, okay, because we didn't finalize the argument, I'm still mad, but it's I'm holding on to it because, just because I feel like I should, since I didn't agree with her, she didn't agree with me, so I should still be mad. Then it's you go throughout the day and it just progresses for no reason. So I just feel okay, she wants to, have space, because for her, she can kind of escalate her emotions very quickly. So it can be from calm to I'm really pissed. And me, and what annoys her too is that I'm very mellow. So even when I'm mad, this is how I talk. Why are you mad? And she's it's more annoying when someone is calm and angered, so it's okay, I just want to resolve it. And, she has to go through a process of, okay, I'm heated, I need to cool my temperature down, then come back and resolve it. So it was just working towards, okay, give her space, but don't let her forget about it, or don't let me forget about it. And even if it's my fault, it takes a lot for me to admit that I'm wrong and come back. And I'm just I need to do this. So
Right.
I go back and I apologize. And it's almost
It's very important.
yeah, you were right, but you want to say it and really truly mean it. So, because that's important too. Tone is very important. You don't just want to say it just to say it to resolve an argument, because that's another thing too. You can say the words, but if it's not authentic, then that leads to another argument instead of what you thought was a quick resolution.
Exactly. No, I think that's very true. Going back to conflict resolution and just that individual responsibility. But one thing I do find is that, and I know you guys are been married less than 5 years, but I'm sure you've experienced this, that in the early years of marriage, did you not go through this period where it seemed as if you were dealing with issues where you kept pointing fingers, but as your marriage begins to grow, you start looking at what's not going to change about your spouse and where you have to change. How is that transition for you? I mean, when you've fought and you've just realized, maybe I need to just change my approach. Now that can be positive and that can be negative. Some people decide, this is just one of those areas that becomes my cross to carry. Maybe not always a good way, but how have you changed?
Well, giving an example, and for me, when I do dishes, when I cook, mine is like, wash as you go, wash as you go.
That's my husband.
That's
my husband right there.
I don't want to see that big stack at the end.
Because I grew up in a family where things are like, wash as you go. And then I started living with another family where things are stacked up in the sink, and then people are nominated to wash. You have your regular schedule to wash Monday through Friday is this person. So the second family I grew up with was like, they were my cousins, but we were like 6 and the children in there. And everyone is like, you had your own responsibility. But whoever was washing dishes in the night, usually people just get into the sink, boom, boom, and everything just starts to heap up. So my principle has always been wash as you go. Then, getting into marriage, we fought the battles back and forth. It's like, okay, if I am going to wash the dishes, please don't lump it. Mostly with the oily items and non-oily items. So, but I've come to accept. To say that, okay, the way she does is quite different from the way and I've started to make it a non-issue.
Right.
Because at a point in time, it's like, initially she was listening, at a point in time, it's like, sorry, she still piles things up. But I've come to accept that as a non-issue. And
isn't that, in that statement is such a powerful phrase. I've come to accept it as a non-issue. That means you can actually, marriage and life is about choices. That you can make a choice to see a situation and to interpret it going forward in a particular way that prevents ongoing frustration and conflict. So at times, part of maturity in marriage is for you to redefine your perception of an issue. To say, my wife isn't being disrespectful or being lazy. Because these are things that I don't know why you're so lazy that I can't do these dishes immediately. So, these are things that, who are you calling lazy? And that's how the fight began. You know what I mean? And by deeming something or choosing to categorize it, because things are on a level. Now, we know it's not everything we can do that way. One of the things I found out in most relationships is when couples have just started in marriage, knowingly or unknowingly, we all come in with lots of expectations. And the challenge in marriage is your ability to minimize the width of your expectations. Because the wider your expectations, the wider the propensity for conflict. So just before we go on a break, let me ask, what is one thing you expected that this is what my wife would do, or this is what my husband would do in marriage, and has been a rude shock to you, and you've had to adjust yourself to your new reality?
So for me, I'm an introvert, but I like to do things like adventure. And my expectations, I was like, oh, now when I'm married, I'm going to have somebody a partner to do everything with me. And we're talking about marathons, skydiving, doing all these adventures. And Ayo, like when his chill time or his things to do for fun are like mellow things, like I don't know, play video games or like
Movies,
do spreadsheets.
whatever.
But for me, I'm like, I want to jump out the sky, and it's like I realize I'm like, okay, he doesn't have to do every single thing with you. He doesn't have to go to the gym with you every single time. Like, you know, there's certain times where I'm like, okay, no, you have to do this with me as my partner. But at first, I was just kind of like, man, you're supposed to be my partner in crime. Like, how come, you know, you're not coming out to this? But I just realized, you know, we came from two different households, two different upbringings, and we're two different people. So some things we can do together, and some things we can do separately. So.
Oh, very interesting. Because those adventures are things that you could call quality time. So having to address that and release each other, that's a good one. What about Kemi?
So I think the angle I'll take it from will be after we had our baby. So one of the expectations that I had, of course, you know, and he's very, you know, helpful around. I talked about dishes and everything. So it's a man that cares about dishes that will, you know, take care of dishes. So very helpful. And so after we had a baby, of course, after the whole, you know, waking up at night to take, you know, to when the baby's crying and everything was something that initially when I first had, I thought, oh my God, he'll be up with me and we're, you know, taking care of the baby together. But I just realized that he needs to sleep and get his rest, and not because when he's not rested, he's cranky. So I just realized that just let him sleep at night, and then he'll help you during the day. And so for me, that was just, you know, something that I just adjusted to, you know, and everything. And so we just have a nice rhythm. And same with he stays up late. I don't. You know, and I don't like him not coming to bed, but I realized that his relaxation, his me time. And so I just realized that, you know, hey, it's different. And I just say, hey, babe, you know, are you coming to bed? And he'll try to come as soon as possible.
Oh, wow. Nice one. Very rarely that we're waiting is the man that I hear says, where are you?
No, right.
That's a very good one.
Wants to watch Avengers.
We'll be right back after this quick announcement. We'll take a quick break. Thank you. On today's episode with Relationships at Adenyke, we've been having a very nice discussion with couples who have been married for less than 5 years, exploring their experiences, lessons learned, and on this journey, the things they've picked up that I believe has been of great insight to everyone. So as we come to the end of today's show, let me just ask, starting with the ladies, what one advice did you receive before marriage that you can look back on and say, this was very good advice, or this probably wouldn't have worked in my own marriage? Kemi?
Wow. I'm trying to think. I got a lot of advice. I would say for me, it was more around respecting my husband no matter what. And choosing to commit to him no matter what. Somebody, I remember the word no matter what, or it was the word regardless that the person was using consistently. It was like, marriage is tough, but you need to love and honor your husband regardless. So no matter what he does or doesn't do, it's a commitment. You stick to it, you support him no matter what. And for me, it helps me when I got my surprises, you know, early in marriage. Ooh, who is this? Regardless stood out in my mind.
I like that, regardless. What about you, Tosin?
Mine was balance. Like, make sure that, you know, you just don't lose yourself in the process. Because if you take care of yourself and your mind and your health, that way you'll be able to be the best wife you can be to your husband, and also the best mother you can be to your children, and also to choose your battles. That was one big one. It's like not every single thing you have to be the one that's right. You don't always have the final say. Sometimes you should be able to take criticism and then learn from it, and not always have to rebuttal back to what your partner says. And of course, like what Kemi says, always respect your husband, even if you're the breadwinner or if you have a higher title. Just always respect your husband, because he's the head of the
That has worked
household.
for you. Amazing. Let me flip it to the guys. Guys, did you get any advice before you got married? Okay, good.
Make sure she's the one.
Make sure, yeah. Make sure she's the one. Make sure she's the one.
Make sure she's the one.
I guess for one of the advice I got, which I know has been helpful, is that your wife is a gift. That you have to treasure her and take care of her. And that word gift just explains everything by itself, that you take care of her and you treasure her. So that was a very good advice, which I believe still helps me to this day.
Good one. Okay.
I thank God that a lot of the friends that I had, were already married and, gave me a lot of advice, and just even seeing their relationships, with my own eyes, picking up things from there. But, one thing that you always hear constantly is that, marriage isn't just going to be sustained by love, because it's like when the romantic, emotional love dies down, it's that love is a decision. You choose to love that person. So when all the butterflies and everything disappear, this is still the marriage that you have to be committed to. So it's like, it's a decision that you make, and knowing that this is the one and only person that's for you, you have to always make it work no matter what. So.
Amazing. I like that. I love a lot of the points you raised. Now, we've talked about your marriage. We've talked about, where you guys have come from, how there were, you walked down the aisle. There were two of you. Now, less than 5 years later, I've heard all these wonderful things, but I do know that in each of these households, there are no longer two people living in there. There are now three people living in there.
Oh, yeah.
So congratulations to both families, because you actually have
Thank
daughters.
Thank you.
What has been a major change in the dynamics between both of you since the babies came? What is the impact of having children on this marriage?
I would say everything has to be intentional. You can't just get up and go. And then you have to remember your partner, and you have to be intentional about the romance. Because I remember at first when we're still new parents, but the first few months of our parenthood, so my husband will be talking to my daughter, and I'll be telling him how my day was. And it's like the volume got louder. So he'd be like, hey, to my baby. And it's like, hello, like I'm talking to you. Like, I know that's your princess, but I'm your queen. Like, don't forget about me. I mean, for me, I felt like I don't know his perspective, I'll let him speak for that, but I felt like at first it was like we were so caught up into trying to get the parenting thing correctly that we kind of forgot about ourselves. So I'll say that now we're still trying to make it work, but I think the most thing was that everything has to be intentional. We have to plan everything out, like have a babysitter or nanny before we go out. We can't just get up and go anymore.
No.
So.
Yeah. I mean, for me, fatherhood has been one of the most wonderful experiences. When you think about, moments in your life, you're like, marriage was such a joyous occasion. Now being a father is also a joy. It's like, I look at my daughter, and it's like, as much as I love her, I, have, to love my wife as much, if not more, because that child came from her, and it's like I can't now neglect the original woman in my life for this new little mini me that came. But I thank God for both of them, and it's amazing. You think that you've given, or you've shown, or you've expressed all the love that you could express or show, and then a baby comes, and it's like, why am I smiling? Like, she's spitting up, she pees on your hand and you're smiling like, oh, isn't that cute? But it's like, it's not cute, but because it's a baby, everything, it's just fantastic. So the whole experience has been a great learning experience for us. So.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I remember somebody saying to me and my husband was that, you know, when the children come, they will change your lives.
Yeah.
Now we know that, but he said it that, you know, if you ever had, if 5% of your conflict before children was about whatever, just know that when they come, 95% of your conflict will probably be something related to children.
Yeah.
You know, what are some of the things that you notice that, you know, just having your beautiful gift as a child that you love, but it brought more, examples of how you needed more understanding to resolve issues that could come up out of that, or conflict that could come up out of that?
I mean, I'm trying to think here. I mean, just like Ayo shared, I mean, for me, I feel like my life has been turned right side up, or, you know, like total change in perspective, from a life perspective and everything. And I feel like one of the things I'll say, you know, Femi had to say to me at some point was, Kemi, don't lose yourself. Because I feel like when I had her, I was like, oh my God, my life is changing. Oh my God, I just want to be a mother forever and not do anything else. I was like, wait. And just really, him just trying to pull me out of that, you know, place of being so, you know, I think I'm one of those hardcore people. When I'm in something, I just go all the way. Pull me back and just say, Kemi, just see the big picture and try to make sure that you have the right balance. And so for me, that has been, you know, the change. As wonderful as it has been, you know, I remember him having those candid conversations with me to just say, Kemi, you're still a woman of purpose. You still have dreams as an individual, as a woman. And he woke me up to be able to see that again and to say, I'm making sure that I'm focusing on who I am as a woman and focusing on my vision, even for the sake of my children, so that they can also see what it looks like to live out a life of purpose. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I'll let Femi have the last word on how being a father has enriched your marriage.
It has. Being a father basically also, just to add to what she said, basically also lets me realize that you have to spend time with your child. Because she drops her, most of the time, Kemi drops her off at daycare and I pick her up. And then prior to us having a child, and also in me being single, sometimes I get back from work, okay, I get on the computer, I'm still doing some work, trying to say, okay, when I get home, I will submit this, I will meet the deadline and the whole thing. But now I don't think I can do that comfortably now. You get back from work, okay, you bring Gabby in, Gabby needs to eat. And you also have to, by the time Kemi gets back, you also have to know that you either get something to eat, and time just goes on like that. And it comes very late in the night, and you open up your laptop, getting some work done. Sometimes you are very tired. So it has been a fun experience, but I see as time goes on, you also have to realize that apart from work, you have a family.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to create that time for the family, unless time is just going to pass you by.
Amazing. Wow, this has been such, like I said before, not just insightful, but it's always such a pleasure to, you know, just to have that opportunity to go through your individual experiences, starting a family, building the right foundation, and really just doing life together. And I think for most of our audiences today, we would have all, you know, remembered that once again, some of the things that are most precious in life are the people that we touch, the people that we consider family. And family can represent different things for all of us. Thank you so much for being a part of today's show. It's been really great having all of you. Thank you. And thank you very much to our viewers who have tuned in once again to today's episode with Relationships with Adenyke. For more information, please visit us on any of our social media channels that's showing right now. Would love to hear from you. Please reach out to us, give us your comment, tell us what you think about the show. And until the next time that we come across again, I'd like to say see you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.